Hey guys, WyattXPlural here, everyone's favorite YouTuber who stutters and mispronounces, and today doing some responses to the videos by the punk rock MBA. That's right guys, response says plural, and I'm going to be talking about 3 videos that the punk rock MBA has done, which are titled What Killed Slam Death Metal, What Killed Death Metal, and why do people enjoy black metal? So we'll start it off with the first video, What Killed Slam Death Metal? And within the opening minutes of this video, I gotta say he kind of contradicted himself pretty hard. So he starts off basically by saying what he dislikes about slam death metal.
And one quick note, there's unfortunately a lot of misogynist stuff in this genre, which I really can't stand, and I want to be super clear that I definitely do not support any of that.
Okay, you don't like misogynistic lyrics and themes within that music. But then when you continue on a couple of minutes into the video, he uses Devourment's Baby Killer as an example of a highlight within slam death metal.
And last but definitely not least, the band that put slam on the map, Devourment. If I was to point to one song that's the template for modern slam, it would be the song Baby Killer from their album 138.
Like, you are giving a praise to a band that has a song Baby Killer and merchandise that looks like this. But one thing I want you guys to remember throughout this whole video is he talks about in the What Killed Slam Death Metal video the certain 2 things he looks for in slam death metal, that he wants it to basically almost be a requirement subjectively. And I want you guys to remember this, that he likes this genre done a certain way.
First, slam riffs, obviously. I'm talking about those slow, chuggy, palm-muted power chords with lots of chromatic notes and pinch harmonics. Second, the vocals. It has to have those ultra-guttural, gurgling vocals. Let me also spell out the things that slam does not have in my definition of it. First of all, no skank beats ever. To me, slam is also defined by 2 more things. First, the production, which I guess we could charitably call raw, but I think most people would just call awful. And last, but definitely not least, the ringy, cranked snares.
But as we continue on in this video, he talks about the decline for slam death metal and death metal as a whole, stating that it's become sterile, it's boring, repetitive, nothing's fresh, to even going along the lines to say this about melodic death metal.
There was a massive glut of generic, formulaic death metals in the 90s and 2000s that was boring and, well, just not heavy. And what really turned me off to the whole genre of death metal for a long time was the melodic death metal mega trend that started in the late 90s. It was way too clean and non-threatening, and just, to me, the whole idea of melodic death metal at all is a total oxymoron. To me, melodic death metal is like saying non-alcoholic vodka. It just makes no sense. Like, those 2 things don't belong together.
And the final thing I want to talk about with the slam death metal video is that, as you can see in the title, it's called What Killed Slam Death Metal, thus implying that he's going to come to a conclusion that slam death metal has died, it's gone, and it's no longer a thing. But at the end of the video, he states this.
Which brings us to part 8, present day. To be honest, slam is almost certainly more popular than ever. It's just changed form in a way that I personally don't care for. So though slam may not officially be dead, in my eyes it's dead, at least creatively.
Let's be honest, guys. That's pretty misleading of a title. I mean, if you want to do a topic like this, then I would suggest making a title called Is Slam Death Metal Dead? ? Leaving a question, then your points, topics, and timeline would discuss if it is or isn't. But again, you can kind of see why the confusion with people within the opening moments of this video is kind of irritating for them, because anyone who's kept up with slam death metal damn sure knows that it ain't dead. Now let's move on to the second video that we're going to be talking about, which is What Killed Death Metal. And again, what I just said a minute ago, you can apply it with this title. I'll say within this video, the first half, he does a pretty good job with talking about the overall history of death metal, the audio samples, and some pretty big names and interviews, and he did an overall good job. But then we get to the decline of death metal, this part, And I want you to like pay attention to this.
And musically, as you've heard a lot of these black metal guys talk about, it was deliberately the opposite of all the things death metal had become in their eyes and in mine as well. Death metal was overproduced, sterile, and predictable by the mid-90s. But black metal, on the other hand, was raw, chaotic, and experimental. Standard death metal bands like Incantation or Immolation felt kind of dated compared to this stuff. It just felt like they belonged to a previous generation. Like the big, slow dinosaurs lumbering around while the little, nimble mammals ran circles around them.
Yes, I get the fact that black metal has become a new face for people, and with all the drama surrounding it, people are getting more interested with that. But to state that now Incantation, Immolation have become old dinosaurs and people are running circles around it, and that it's become just so sterile and predictable, that is where you kind of contradict yourself a little bit, because if we go back to your slam death metal video, you state that slam death metal should only be this way, and then yet you're criticizing death metal because it stayed its certain way. He's making it sound like the only way to be successful and to get the public's eye within metal and extreme metal is you have to be groundbreaking and, you know, innovative all the time and mind-blowing every single time in order to get fame and success, how it really comes off. And that's just overall not the case. It really just comes down to if the album's well written and if people like it. I mean, for me personally, one of my all-time favorite black metal albums is Human Serpent's Inhumane Minimalism, and I'll tell you right off the bat, literally nothing about this album is groundbreaking or something innovative. It is just such stripped down, straightforward black metal. And again, to criticize Incantation and Immolation as just old dinosaurs that people are running circles around, nowadays they've become one of the most influential death metal bands I know of. I've lost count of how many bands that I hear that remind me of Incantation. Then we get to the last point he brings up, which is about how death metal has carried over its legacy and is still relevant in today's pop culture. Which, I'm not gonna lie, there's one part he brings up that really made me laugh, which is that death metal sound has carried over to other genres that may not be as heavy. Like, for instance, he says this about A Day to Remember.
On the musical side of things, its influence is very much felt on pretty much every subgenre of heavy music, even genres that are pretty far removed from death metal. For example, the growling vocals in a pop-punk band like A Day to Remember, in my opinion, can be directly traced back to death metal.
Like, what? You're really gonna tell me that the screams of A Day to Remember remind you of Morbid Angel and Deicide? Like, are you gonna next tell me that the scream in Red Jumpsuit Apparatus' song Face Down reminds you of Dark Throne? I don't know. Like, that inclusion just felt really forced. But then he talks about how it's even got into the realms of fashion.
And the guy who started the brand is now the creative director for the high fashion brand Balenciaga, which means that death metal has officially become cool. It's officially become highbrow in a weird kind of way. I could go on and on listing more examples of that, but really none of them would beat the most ridiculous and amazing example of this, which is Kim Kardashian wearing a Morbid Angel shirt. What a time to be alive. What matters is the fact that their shirt ended up on probably the most famous person on the planet tells you that they and the rest of their peers in the 90s death metal scene, they did something pretty fucking groundbreaking. They did something that made a real mark on the world of music and culture.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Before watching this video, I would have no fucking clue that somehow death metal has made it into the fashion world at any point, and I really don't know how that's even remotely relevant. This just seems so insanely forced in to give off another example when, again, if I didn't know this video, I would have never have known this. I've never seen anyone even bring this up. Plus, as well, too, honestly, who the hell cares that Kim Kardashian wore a Morbid Angel shirt? Like, what validation does that give off in any aspect? Okay, now we move on to his latest video as of yet, which is, why do people like black metal? First off, he kind of starts off the video with the whole background story of black metal, and I feel like it's a little bit rushed, as he basically says, hey, if you want to know more about the scene of black metal and the history of it, just check out Lords of Chaos.
I'm going to skip over a whole lot of details here because because like I said, it's been told so many times before. You can go read Lords of Chaos or whatever if you want to know all the details.
Personally, I strongly disagree with using Lords of Chaos as a reference to learn about black metal. That's equivalent to saying, hey, you want to know some good Italian food? Well, just go to Olive Garden. Basically, that is a book that the diehard fans and artists themselves absolutely despise, because that book just solely focuses only really on the controversial things that happen and really doesn't talk about certain bands, the influence, and just the overall way that black metal was really fully made and constructed for the overall public. So for me personally, if I were to recommend some documentaries to get into so you can get your feet wet with black metal, one I would recommend is Until the Light Takes Us. Phenomenal film. Everything you want in a documentary is in this. And the other one, which is a little bit more relevant in terms of the bands they interview, but still very well done, is a noisy 3-part interview with Leviathan, Streborg, and Zaster. Getting back on track here, the main reason he states why he dislikes black metal as a whole is that it's become repetitive, it's overly edgy, it just has the same type of artwork, and it's nothing new at all.
My problem with black metal is actually much more simple than that. I think it's boring. Boring music, boring forced edginess, boring recycled imagery, stale. It's just not interesting to me.
But then says he finds interest in some of these black metal bands, most of them being from the LLN, that have like the dark ambience and the noisy atmosphere to them, stating that he likes stuff to be different and, you know, kind of innovative with the sound, which again brings me to the argument I had earlier with slam death metal. You find so much interest in a genre that just stays true to these two components, yet if other genres still carry out those components that other people like, you criticize it that it just becomes stale and boring. Finally, just last thought here. I'm not upset that he dislikes black metal. It's his opinion, he doesn't like it, simple as that. What I'm just really confused by is the way he criticizes all three genres, that nothing really adds up or really makes sense. As you saw with black metal, he dislikes it because it's been the same all these years. He finds it repetitive with the aesthetic of it, and that anything really innovative about black metal has been shattered like 25 years ago. And then with death metal, he finds that in the late 90s it got stale and boring and wasn't that heavy, and it just really stuck to their same formula for those 10 years that it's been around. But yet with slam death metal, he likes the fact that it stays with this formula and these attributes that he talked about that it needs to stay with. So you like slam death metal because it's stuck with their original formula, yet you criticize and think that it's bad because black metal and death metal didn't get innovative. Like right there, you're really making me confused as to how you critique music. But that's really it, guys, for everything I wanted to point out with Punk Rock MBA, because I know a lot of people in the comments and I keep up with just have a lot of like confusion with some of his points, and I just wanted to clarify it. Overall, I'm going to state this about the dude. I actually really enjoy his content. I think he has great editing. His overall flow of every video is really interesting and quite entertaining, and I find enjoyment in pretty much everything else he's done. But a lot of these videos I felt like needed a response to kind of clarify some of his points, because it always just, again, kind of left me scratching my head. So that's it, guys, for this video. Like always, hopefully you guys discovered something new. Thanks for watching, liking, supporting, and subscribing. You guys are the best, and good listens.